our focus to Microsoft Azure. We will start with Azure regions worldwide, and then we'll begin introducing you to core Azure resources. We'll look at Azure architectural components, looking at regions and availability zones, and moving on to core resources such as compute, networking, storage, and databases. Starting with regions, I want you to take a look at the map to the right-hand side. Take a look at those blue dots around the world, and those blue dots represent regions, Azure regions. We have over 60 regions located globally, as you can see, representing over 140 countries. Azure actually has more global regions than any other cloud solution provider. That blue dot, which is that region, represents a collection of data centers. It can be from 1 to up to 16 data centers. These regions help organizations meet their data residency requirements, which we'll talk about coming up. When you select a region, you want to select it as close to your customers and users as possible for that low latency we talked about earlier. It's important to note that not all regions have the same features built in, since they were created and built at different times. Now let's go a little bit deeper. We're talking about region pairs. So like those blue dots, they have region pairs, which means two blue dots in the same geography, separated by at least 300 miles of separation. These are automatic region pairs. So it's very important when you plan your deployments to pick automatic region pairs wherever possible. For example, if I was deploying my resources in East US, I'd want to pick the automatic region pair in the West US. So if there ever happened to be a wider Azure outage, one region at every pair would be prioritized to help reduce the time it takes to restore data and applications. So you want to make sure you're in those automatic pairs. When Azure plans updates, they are rolled out to one of the region pairs at a time to minimize any downtime and risk of application outage. These region pairs are 300 miles apart for data protection. And then we have availability zones. They are built to protect against downtime due to a data center failure. So when we refer back to that map, that blue dot, we are looking at an Azure region, select the diagram on the right-hand side. And inside that region, we could have multiple availability zones, up to 3 actually. These are physical, separate data centers located within the same region. Each one of these data centers is equipped with its own independent power, cooling, and networking. And they're connected together with private fiber optic networks, so there's very low latency between them. So if one region happened to go down, in this example, let's say availability zone went down, availability zone 2 would be fine, because it's independent. As a reminder, not all regions have the same availabilities. You want to make sure they have the architectural structure you need before deploying your resources. So let's take a look at an availability zone in Dublin, Ireland. So this is Azure's facility in Dublin, Ireland. I'll give you a second just to look around. There's lots to see in this picture. Let's start off with the physical structure. As you can see, we have a fenced wall that goes around the entire structure, all the way around. And that's for security, so we want to prevent people from coming in. So adding to our security, we have some physical security, so there's this gate here. We've got security cameras, and if someone was trying to ram the gates, let's say, even if they got past here, they've got to go through a round driveway, so they're not building up any kind of speed. They're going to come around here, have to make a sharp left to be able to get in, so they're not building up any kind of speed. That's meant for security. You can see there's not a lot of parking. Because we don't want a lot of visitors. It's not open to the public. If you get a chance to go to a data center, you're invited. Please go, because it's very rare to go actually see a data center. If you're not on the list to go see a data center, you will not go in. You can't knock on the door, buzz security, and say, I think I have some things in here. I just want to take a look around. We're not letting you in. It's meant for the protection of all our customers inside this data center. So you can see by the size of the cars in relation to the building, how big this facility is. We've got 3 different colors of buildings here. We've got this blue one up front, this mainly white one back here, and then another blue one back here. So you are actually looking at one availability zone with 1, 2, 3 data centers. So these data centers have their own heating, cooling, and networking. And there's power generation sources here for the buildings. There's actually a physical gap between these two buildings. You can't see because of this high wall, but you can see this one a little bit more. There's a physical gap here between these two data centers. There's also some power sources over here for these data centers. So remember, if this one happened to go down, these ones are independent of each other and they would still operate. So this is the Dublin data center. This is actually 3, 4, and 5 data centers out of almost 15 in this area, to give you an idea of the size of these data centers. So let's talk about availability options. In the cloud, we have a lot of flexibility to plan for backup and resiliency in case there's a data center failure or some sort of issue. When we talk about availability options, we want to make sure we're getting as high a 9 as possible. So starting on the left-hand side, I've got one single VM, and it's a 99.9 uptime SLA, which is a service level agreement, with premium storage. So that's a single machine. If I wanted to do better on that number, I'm going to go to the right-hand side, and I've got that same VM with an SLA of 99.99. So it's a higher SLA because I'm distributing that VM and its backup across availability zones. Remember, that's separating themselves from each other, independent power, cooling, and networking in a region. Moving over one more time to the right. So if I'm dispersing my virtual machine across multiple regions, I'm going to get even higher SLA because I'm diversifying and spreading out my risk. So in this case, on the right-hand side, I'm looking at region pairs. So remember, 300 miles apart minimum is the region pair rule. We'll talk about that in further details in another module, but I just wanted to introduce that concept. We're having a plan for backup, plan for resiliency, and that's the benefit of the cloud. It's easy to do. Now let's start talking about Azure Resources. So in the cloud, what do we put in the cloud? We, of course, build our environments, we build our applications, we put our databases there, and these are some of the resources we have available. We've got, of course, virtual machines, we have storage accounts, we have databases, app services, functions, many different resources in the cloud. So you pick and choose what you need to run. And then we have resource groups. So we have those resources on the previous slide. We want to make sure we're grouping them into some sort of logical group. It could be by project type or project lifecycle, which is normally the preferred way of doing it. So when that project is ended and you no longer need those resources, you can deallocate them off the cloud, and it's easy to do. Other companies put all virtual machines together, and all the storage together, and all the web and databases together. So different ways of organizing. You as a company should organize how you're going to do it. Resources, so if I had that virtual machine or that app, can only exist in one resource group. But that resource can be anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be in the same region as that resource group. You can move resources between different groups if you needed to. And applications can access multiple resource groups. You don't have to be in one resource group. We're also going to talk about role-based access coming up. And that's ways of securing your access to those resources. Now let's talk about something called Azure Resource Manager, or ARM for short. ARM, or Azure Resource Manager, provides that management layer that helps you create, update, and delete resources within your subscription. The best benefit of it is it allows you to automatically deploy and configure resources using different automation tools and scripting tools, such as Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, or Command Line Interface, the Azure Portal, REST APIs, and client software development kits. Automating the creation of resources help you maintain consistency and standards across your deployment. So suppose you have several business units around the world and they require 10 identical resources. You can use an ARM template or Azure Resource Manager template to deploy those resources consistently. So that's one of the benefits of using an ARM template. Then we have Azure Subscriptions. An Azure subscription provides you with authenticated, authorized access to Azure accounts. In the diagram to the right-hand side, you can see we have in blue an Azure account, and underneath it we have 3 subscriptions. I want you to think of subscriptions as the billing account. So take out the S from subscription and put a $sign there. So the bill would come to dev, would come to test, and would come to production in this example. So the billing account is a subscription, and it's the automatic billing boundary. It's also an access control boundary as well, where you can access and manage control to those resources within a certain subscription. An account can have multiple subscriptions like you see in front of you. We're going to jump into the portal and take a look around it. So let's go. Here we are in portal.azure.com. Let's take a look at what the portal looks like in Azure. Starting from the right-hand side, we're going to make our way left as we cover all the buttons we press. So hovering over, this is my account. Tells me my email address, my directory, and also my domain. Moving towards the left, I've got a happy face, so that's my feedback icon. I can give feedback on wherever I am in the portal. If I find this page confusing to understand, give us that feedback so we can use that to improve our products. Moving over to the help, the question mark, I can get help and support starting here. There's also a lot of links below and guided tours that you can take from here. Going over to the cogwheel icon, let's click on that. That's the portal settings itself. So this, what you see in front of me, is my home page, which is right here. I can also switch to a dashboard view as my home page. So whatever I choose, I prefer what I see right now. But you can use dashboard view, and I'll show you what that looks like coming up. I also have an option to have the portal menu as a flyout or dot. I prefer flyout to have more real estate on the page, but you can have it in whatever way you choose. You can also choose between different themes, and you can select here, high contrast, white, black as well. Moving over to notifications, when you see a number there in red, it means you have not seen something in there. So maybe you went to lunch and came back, there might be something you hadn't seen, that's just alerting you about that. Moving one more over to the directory and subscription tab, I can filter between what subscriptions I want to show up when launching the portal. You can see I have many subscriptions down below. I'm going to keep HR tests because I'll be using it all throughout the day. This next button on the top is called Cloud Shell. It's a greater than symbol and an underscore is what it looks like, but it actually pulls up a scripting environment right inside the portal without us having to go anywhere. It's very handy. Moving over one more time to the left, I've got the search bar and I start to type in a word and it starts to filter in services, resources, marketplace, and there may even be a video or two that pops up that helps guide me through what I'm trying to do. Moving one more time over to the left, that's my portal menu that we talked about earlier. You can see what's in there right now. I've got some favorites, as you can see there. Let's take a look at the favorites. I'm hovering over function apps. That star on the right hand side means it's a favorite. If I remove that star by unclicking it, you'll see it will disappear from my menu. Looking at other things in that portal menu, if I hover over virtual machines, I can see recent resources I've created, even some free training from Microsoft, and some useful links along the bottom. Hovering over load balancers, another one, I can see description. It describes what it does. Let's go to virtual networks. It shows me recent resources I've created in virtual networks. So this menu is really handy. Let's go take a look at dashboard. That's the other home page I have an option to have. As you can see, I've got a few resources here. I've got some quick start and tutorials in the center there. I've got metrics. I don't tend to use a lot in this demo account, so it's pretty empty right now. I can set up time zones, users and groups as well. I can also put help and support or any other metrics I'm trying to track. This could be your home page, but remember, you just have to set it up in the portal settings. If I select edit, a graph paper shows up, and I can move these features around to make my dashboard. Continuing on to back to the portal, I can see all the other resources I have in front of me, including the most recent ones I've created. I can go to all resources and take a look at all the resources in my subscription. If I go to all services, these are services that are offered by Microsoft. On the left-hand side are all the different categories, and featured ones are on the right-hand side, and there's even some video training, as you can see down in the bottom. If I click on storage accounts, I can go in and actually create a storage account by just clicking Add and continuing from there. Starting with Azure Compute Services. So what are compute services? They're basically on-demand computing services that provide computing resources such as disks, processors, memory, networking, and operating systems. We've got virtual machines, we have app services, container instances, Azure Kubernetes service, and Windows virtual machines. We're going to go into each one of them in a little bit more detail coming up. So starting with virtual machines, what are they? They're software emulations of physical computers, so virtual. They include a virtual processor, memory, storage, and networking. If you remember our IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS models, this one is an IaaS offering. It gives the organization total control and customization ability. And we should also mention virtual machine scale sets at this time. Remember that automatic scaling we first talked about, one of the benefits of the cloud? Well, virtual machine scale sets allow you to automatically manage fluctuations and workloads in the cloud. Remember that elastic benefit. It's still an IaaS model. There's no pre-provisioning of the VMs required, but you can plan for them to scale out and scale in as needed to manage demands and workflow. Here I am in the portal, and let's get started creating our virtual machine. So I'm going to create the virtual machine, and then I'm going to connect to that virtual machine, and then install a web server role, and then test it. Let's get started. So I'm going to create a new resource. I can also go to virtual machines, or I can also look on the left-hand side here and look for all services, and then compute. And these are all the compute services. We're going to touch on some other ones later. Let's start with virtual machines, clicking on it there. And I'm going to go add a virtual machine. And it pulls up a graphical user interface that will walk me through the creation of my resource. So let's get started. On the Basics tab, which is where we are right now, I'm going to slide down so you can see a little later. We've got these tabs going across the top. They also will repeat across the bottom. Starting with my subscriptions, we're going to talk about subscriptions. That is your account where the billing goes to. So you want to put those resources into a subscription account. I'm keeping the one subscription, and I'm going to use that throughout my demonstrations. But now we need to start by creating a resource group. We talked briefly about resources and then resource groups. So I want you to create your resources, preferably with the same life cycle. I'm going to go ahead and create a new resource group for this demonstration. And I'm going to call it okay, so my resource group VM, the name is available because it's in green. You can see that right here. I'm going to go ahead and create. Sliding down so you can see a little bit better, just moving down to the bottom. Next thing I need to do is create a name for my virtual machine. So what name am I going to give it? When you create your names, I want you to pick something that's meaningful for you and your organization. For my demonstrations, I'm really going to pick a really simple name because I'm going to delete it at the end of the day. So let me go and create a name. I'm going to call it my VM3. Okay, so make sure you pick a name that makes sense to you. Mine are really simple. And because I'm in Toronto, Canada, I'm going to pick a region closest to me, or one of the closer ones. I'm not going to pick Asia. I'm going to go actually to USA East, or East US. Sliding down again, giving you a little bit more visibility here. Something we talked about very briefly, we talked about availability zones. If you recall, that region, the blue dot on the map, has many availability zones inside of it. So I can choose that as my resiliency plan, or there's something called availability sets. We didn't really talk about it, but it's another way of protecting yourself, and they're putting your virtual machine on different servers and different racks in the same data center. So those are availability sets. Different from availability zones, we're actually separate data centers. As I mentioned before, not all regions have the same availability. So I'm going to switch this so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's go to Canada Central, or Canada East, let's pick. We're going to go look at that availability options, and you can see availability zones is grayed out. So in this, I only have an option to pick availability sets. Okay, so every region is different. Make sure you research your regions before starting to put your resources in there, in case there's a particular feature you need. So back to USA East, I'm going to keep these off for now. Don't have to pick them. There's no asterisk there, so it does not mean it's a mandatory field. And I'm going to pick an image for my virtual machine. This one's going to be Windows 2019 Data Center. So I'm going to pick this one here. There's many other private images. I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So there's a lot of images here. There's a particular build you want. And it goes on and on and on. Okay, I'm going to pick something simple, keeping my 2019 data center. Spot instance, that's your chance to save some money if you've got something that's temporary. We tell you not to put anything production on there. But if you have, maybe you're just running a few tests for a couple weeks, so use a space on our server for very cheap. Spot instance tells you right there. Discounted rate versus the pay-as-you-go price. And has to be tolerant to infrastructure loss, so we may need that space. As you'll notice, there's an information icon beside everything. Hovering over gives you information about what they're talking about, what they're looking for as an answer. Okay, so I'm at size right now. I'm going to keep mine pretty basic. As you can see, there's a price here right beside it, and that's part of that predictive cost. So I know what I'm going to spend per month on this virtual machine, and it tells me how many hours as well. So I'm going to let you see other options. These are ones I tend to use more often. There's many more sizes, so I'll let you take a peek quickly. So there's more sizes here. I've filtered between certain gigs, but you can see very much more. Let's go down and scroll. A series, I've got D series, B series, E series, and I'm going to show you pricing just so you understand what I'm talking about. It can go into thousands of dollars, depends on what you choose. Okay, that predictive cost. Back over, I'm going to not pick any of these, I'm just going to pick my default one, which is the D2S version 3. So 2 CPUs and 8 gigs of memory. Now I've got to choose my administrator account, sliding down so you can see my administrator account. Let's call it Azure Admin. And I need to choose a password. So it meets all the criteria for my password, between 1 and 20 characters. It doesn't have any special characters. And it's not a reserved word. Now in the password, I'm going to go pick a password. I want to show you something. It does not let you pick the word password. That is a reserved word. We're not going to let you choose it. And it has to be between 12 and 123 characters long. So I'm going to hide that. I'm going to put in my real password. There you go. It's okay. Confirming that password again. They match, so I'm good to go. Sliding down a little bit more. Now we're at inbound port rules. So as I mentioned before, we're going to connect to this virtual machine, so we need to have some public inbound ports open. So I'm going to make sure I'm allowing ports, and let's go through and choose. I'm going to definitely RDP do it, so I'm going to put that on, and I've got HTTP as well, port 80. So I've got 2 ports open, as you can see, and I'm allowing access because I want to check and connect to this virtual machine. That is allowing IP addresses to access my virtual machine, which I'm trying to do. And it gives me a warning that there is public access to my VM, which I want. Sliding down a little bit further. Licensing, so if I bring my own license, we're going to talk about that when we go through the cost calculator. I'm saving on the licensing fees, which if I have a license, I will definitely bring it. I don't have one, so I'm not going to click that box. But there's a way to save up to 45%, 49%. Moving over to disks. So I'm going to choose premium storage, but I have other options. Premium storage with only one virtual machine running, no backup into an availability zone, one availability set, gives me a 99.9 uptime SLA. And we'll talk about that coming up. So I'm keeping premium storage. Scrolling down a bit more, I'm going to go into networking next. And I want to make sure I can connect to my ports. Scrolling down so you can see it a little bit better. So a virtual network is going to be created, a subnet will be created, and I'm going to get a public IP. Let's check the ports that I have open. I have to make sure both of them are selected as RDP 3389 and HTTP 80. Warning me again, it's going to be allowed public access to my virtual machine, which I want. We'll talk about load balancing coming up. It's not part of now, but you have a chance to load balance across various machines if the load increases. I'm not going to touch that. We're going to go down to management. I'm going to turn off the diagnostics for now because I don't need it. It's a demo machine. Let's take a look at this screen a little bit closely while we're here. I have an option to auto shut down. So suppose I'm working on a test project and I don't want it running over a weekend, or maybe the office is closed for a few weeks. I can actually shut down that virtual machine and I can set the shutdown options. Clicking on it briefly, show you what that looks like. I can shut down, say, at 7 p.m. Do I want a notification before shutting down? And who does that notification go to? I'm going to turn that off for now, but that's where you'd find it. I can also enable backup and start that. I'm not putting that on right now, but I can set that up right while I'm setting up my machine. Going to advanced. I'm going to leave everything as is. I don't have any extensions, anything else I'm loading. It's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to review and create. Oh, let's go to tags too. I mentioned before that my subscription is a billing account. If I have multiple projects and multiple resource groups in the same subscription, I may want to divide up that bill by tagging the resources in it. And that's where I come into tags. I can put a name for my tags. I can say maybe HR. So this belongs to the HR department. And I can maybe call it Project ABC. So I can filter by that project. So that tag will stay with us at the end of the month when I've got several pages of bills or many bills. I can divide it up by project ABC. So let's go ahead and review and create the options I've created, sliding down below. It's verifying that everything makes sense and there's nothing that's unusual. Giving me that predictive cost, as you can see here, it's 24 cents an hour for that virtual machine. So everything is passed, the validation is passed, and I just want you to take a look at this part down here. It's download a template for automation. We're going to talk about that later when we talk about ARM templates. But if I had a lot of complicated choices I made along the way, I may not want to do this every single time when I'm creating a virtual machine. So I could save that template to reuse again and again. I'm not going to do that because my options were quite simple. I'm going to go ahead and create. As you can see, it's starting to work and create. It's also moving up here when something's going on. So it's really going to quickly create. Okay, so my resources created. I can either go here or the other spots. I'm just clicking on the top one. And in my virtual machine called Virtual Machine 3, it is running. It's in East US. So it's ready to go. Just sliding down so you can see a little bit more. So now I want to connect to this virtual machine, and then I'm going to load a file. So let's go to connect. I'm going to connect through RDP because I opened that port. And I'm going to download the RDP file. File is downloaded. Okay, you can't verify the identity of the connection or no connection. I know it is, it's me, so I'm going to connect. I need to sign in as another user. Signing in as in a different account. So remember, Azure Admin is what I used. Putting in my password. There you go, and I'm going to sign in. So it can't identify the remote computer I'm connecting to. That's okay, I'm going to go ahead. And I'm getting into my virtual machine. So here I am in my virtual machine. I'm going to go now connect to PowerShell. I'm going to go down here and look for PowerShell. Here it is there. I'm going to go run PowerShell. Here I am in PowerShell. I'm going to install the web server feature in the virtual machine now. So I'm going to paste the commands I've got ready. So it's install Windows feature, the name is web server, and including management tools. Selecting enter, it's going to run. There you go, so it's finished installing my web server role. You can see success is true. So now I'm going to go back into my actual portal and take a look and connect to it. Back in the portal, I'm at my virtual machine. It's Virtual Machine 3. It is running. And I want to now connect to that virtual machine by going to the public IP address on the right-hand side here. I'm going to copy the IP address to my clipboard, create a new browser window, paste that address in, and there you go. I'm connected to that virtual machine. So we just came back from the portal. We created a virtual machine where I had to pick the resource group, name the VM, and then I connected to that VM through RDP. I loaded a web server image, and then I also tested to see that I could connect. That was one type of compute resource. There's another type of compute resource options, and they are called serverless computing options. So serverless computing is different from virtual machines where it doesn't need storage and an operating system to run.